Good afternoon to all of you. And let me first of all welcome this eminent panel that we have here today. All of you would know them anyway, and already Shushendu has introduced you, all of them to you. I think what we are going to do over the next one and a half hours is actually discuss some of the important contours of bioeconomy in the biotech sector that's likely to make impact as we move into the vision of 2047, as our Honorable Prime Minister says, as Amrit Kal of next 25 years of the work. Bioeconomy is already on the way of about reaching $150 billion industry in India, which is amazing actually from the fledgling industry that it started with very few players, in fact, playing a role in their own ways. And it's been a challenging, and however, what our vision in the government, as Honorable Prime Minister says, is a $5 trillion economy by 24-25. And what that means is that we really need to bootstrap all the things, activities, and contribute to the growing strength of biotech industry, startups, entrepreneurships, and also the major industry players who are all with us, with an aspiration to find technological solutions that are likely to have a wider societal impact, at the same time solving problems of healthcare, food, agri, and all the areas that are actually tremendously important from the point of view of its direct impact in humankind. I think the panelists whom we have today here, they're all in a way one of the edifice of setting up biotechnology revolution in this country actually. Each one of them, in fact, in their own way are an important edifice and have in either capacity in government or in the industry or in the technological sectors that they have completely put together their energy and systems to be able to carry out these activities. I would like to start from Professor G. Padmanaban, who is in fact led many of the Government of India efforts in biotechnology right from the inception of Department of Biotechnology in 1986. And he's also been through BIRAC, setting up BIRAC, and variety of activities and models that are prevailing in our country actually, right from being part of it actually. What can we do it differently and in a faster way to better impact the biotechnology in India? If you can give an overview on that, that will be very, very useful for us.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, for asking me to talk to you. As he said, I was around 1982 when National Biotechnology Board was started, became a Department of Biotechnology in 86. So it has been an association of 40 years. And so far as BIRAC is concerned, M.K. Bhan, former secretary, who is unfortunately no more with us, visited US in early 2000. And I got a call in the night, I want to bring SBIR to India. I want you to be chairing the technical committee. And before I could answer, he has put down the phone. It is typical of Bhan's style. Anyway, I have been around, as Dr. Gokhale said, that all these years, and I thought I should call it a day and give it to Dr. Batra. But I am still there as a member of the BIRAC team. SBIR India, Dr. Renu Swarup was a senior officer and she knows, to work it out. We soon found out it's not adequate. 2 years of support, 3 years of support, then what? So that's how you see all these programs, biotechnology industry partnership program, contract research scheme, grant challenges, then, more recently, all these mega projects, whether it is COVID, whether it is biopharma, National Biopharma Mission, all these have come into existence and it has become enormous. So BIRAC has really, I think, is a tremendous experiment, and it has a Section 8 company, as we all know, and number of products, a large number of products. But Dr. Rajesh has asked me a very specific question. Where do we move forward? So I have 4 points to make generally in this context. Most of the products which are commercialized are devices and diagnostics. It's okay. We should have devices and diagnostics, absolutely. But my feeling is we should move beyond devices and diagnostics. And even in diagnostics and devices, I find central reagent. What is the central reagent in at least many of the devices and diagnostics? It may be a polymerase enzyme, it may be a monoclonal antibody, or it may be any kind of protein, or it can even be nucleotides. And you ask them, where do you get the central reagent? No, sir, that comes from Korea, that comes from China. To my mind, we really need our own clones, upstream research. And that complaint that academia is not interested is not true anymore. Academia under great pressure, they have now moved into a lot of them into translation. I feel a great collaboration can ensue, and I feel, Dr. Rajesh, every government institution, be it DBT, DST, CSR, whatever, should have startups. I don't see it in all of them. Many of them have. We should have startups because they will take forward your ideas. Therefore, I believe this is one way by which we should move forward. And what did I mean having central reagents? All the reagents fundamental to devices, because fantastic devices are made. Artificial intelligence is applied. Miniaturization is done. But, crucial reagents are missing. Crucial proteins are missing. Biosimilars we are talking about. Clones cannot be obtained from elsewhere. We have to make our own clones. So, the next point I want to make is we should move into drug discovery. Devices and diagnostics are important. Nothing is less important. But we should move into drug discovery. And where in drug discovery, my feeling is we have an advantage probably in natural products. Probably in knowledge may come from traditional medicine, it's okay. But a lot of science has to get into it. And we really need to get into, drug discovery. And as you know, now the DCGI is permitting even extracts. It was not there before. I had a battle for a decade. But now there is you can have plant extracts, but not the way we are doing. Every molecule has to be characterized. And if it is possible, pure synthetic molecules have to come. And I feel, I would like to include vaccine. We have two giants here, one who said, and I must tell you, I was the one who argued for the whole viral vaccine. I said, why we have forgotten that? And at the other end, Sanjay Singh is sitting about mRNA vaccine. It is not just mRNA vaccine, it is self-amplifying mRNA vaccine. So we have two, who could show that we can do either of them, and perhaps we will succeed. But I feel we should move even there, newer thing, maybe a cancer vaccine. Why not? This is international, you will see it is coming. The third point I want to make is data science. We have great expertise in IT, we have great expertise in bioinformatics. And data science we always discuss in terms of genome analysis, that's fine. Multiple genome complexity is all there. But in the COVID committees I learned, Dr. Swarup, that the public health database is missing in this country. Database for public health, whether it is diabetes, whether it is tuberculosis, we need to have data science applied there. Not only genome analysis. There are many areas in which we can get into data science. And India has a great opportunity. And the last point, I will only take 2 minutes, is application of technology to agriculture. We have not, I see light at the end of the tunnel. SDN1, SDN2 have been approved in genome editing, in gene editing. Thanks to DBT, they were the ones who put it forward. We can take gene editing forward, at least at these 2 levels in agriculture. I must also tell you, many of you would know better, a lot of agri-products have come from the Western world. That has not happened in India. There are still under initial stages of gene editing. And the last point I want to make, there is no reason why transgenics are not taken forward. Transgenics in agriculture. I'm surprised BT Brinjal is still under embargo. For what? Why should BT Brinjal be under embargo? We have 25 years of experience in transgenics and no untoward incident has taken place. So my plea is, let us have 2 technologies applied to agriculture, be it transgenics, be it gene editing. They have, depending on you, make the choice, for which application, which trait, which crop you want to apply, which technology. So, of course, there are many issues of investment beyond the government, etc. There are much better experts who can explain on this. I just thought for your specific question, these are the 4 suggestions I have that we should move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comments. I would now move on to Dr. Renu Swarup. There can be no better person in this panel than to celebrate this occasion of 10th year of BIRAC, because she, along with Dr. Bhan, first set it up, and then with Professor Vijay Raghavan and from her own time as Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, chaperoned BIRAC over the years. I think it's much better to listen to her, from her itself, about the roadmap, what we had in the past and what you think it should be the future of the BIRAC roadmap. You would like to outline for us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale. At the outset, my heartiest congratulations to you, the entire BIRAC team, the DBT team, and every stakeholder who's been connected with these 10 years of BIRAC, with the building of the BIRAC ecosystem, building up of the biotech ecosystem. Heartiest congratulations on the 10th birthday. 10 years is a very important landmark. For BIRAC, they know very well. As per the DPIIT definition, you no longer are a startup now. After 10 years, you move out of the whole thing of being a startup. And that gives you much more added responsibility. Today was a very important day, and it was so wonderful to have the Honorable Prime Minister here. And all of you saw what really has been the growth of the biotech ecosystem in 10 years. And as Dr. Rajesh Gokhale has said, what happens in the next couple of years, whether it's the next 25 years or, as the Honorable Prime Minister put it, when BIRAC turns 25, I think it's important to step back for a moment and see what the journey was in these 10 years, and then what is it that you're going to do as you move ahead. What made the biotech ecosystem reach where it has today? The first time the seed for something like BIRAC was sown was in 2007, when we had our biotech strategy and Dr. Bhan was the secretary. We wrote in that 30% of the funds would be spent on PPP. And believe me, after we launched the strategy, we both sat down, and it was in the secretary's office, and I went into his office and asked him, "Sir, what is BIRAC going to be?" He said, "Let's sit down and think now what BIRAC is going to be." So that was the risk that was taken. There was a vision which was announced, and we created a roadmap. Why? Because there was a space that was a vacuum. There was nothing like a biotech startup ecosystem that existed at that point of time. Whatever BIRAC did was very quickly accepted, appreciated by the ecosystem, and brick by brick, we saw what was built and where we stand today. The next 10 years, or the next 15 years, or the next 25 years are now going to depend on how you sustain this scalability, but more importantly, what is that exponential growth that comes into the sector? We have to remember one thing, that when BIRAC came in, it was by itself. And as I said, it was a vacuum. Today, it's a crowded market. In this crowded market, there's a lot of competition. But more importantly, there is a lot of expectation. National, international, global. How are we going to keep up to that expectation? Are we going to be in the top 3 countries in the world? COVID came as an opportunity to be able to showcase the strength, and we saw how we delivered. The biotech ecosystem delivered the strength in terms of vaccines, diagnostics, and the entire biopharma sector. This, what came out during the COVID times, was because of the very strong foundation that was set up, whether it was the National Biopharma Mission, whether it was the pool of researchers from BIPP, SIBRI and others, whether it was the big grantees, whether it was the entire shared infrastructure which our autonomous institutes put forward together. We made the best of this. The trust between academia and industry deepened, and I think the boundaries between them blurred. Now it's important to take this forward. Just to carry this forward, the sectors of agri, the sectors of clean energy, the sectors of new technologies, the omics, it's all there now. And I think what biotech can do is not just even an exponential growth. It's ready to actually be into a biotech revolution. 25 years from now, we would many a times underestimate what we can do. When we put in a 100 billion target expectation for ourselves in 2019, we realized that by 2025, we would be far surpassing that. And then $150 billion was put in. So it's not about numbers. You can say, okay, in 25 years from now, we'll be a $500 billion economy. But I think it's not the numbers. It's what difference are you going to make? Are those biotech products, 750 products today, how many are going to impact the society? Today, every citizen knows about vaccines because it's impacted them. Similarly, agriculture, similarly, clean energy. So I think all that I would like to say at this point is the next few years is going to be technology driven. We cannot lose sight on cutting edge technologies. More importantly, keep the culture on allowing this ecosystem to take risk. The moment you sort of put them into too many boundaries and do not allow them to take a risk, we won't be able to succeed. The mRNA vaccine, the DNA vaccine, the Covaxin itself, these were all risk-taking abilities, and we succeeded. So I think I'll conclude by saying it's the trust factor that needs to continue. It's the risk-taking ability, high risk, high investment, high rewards. You'll have to focus on that. But more than anything else, it has to be a technology-driven growth that you put forward. Your ecosystem is ready for it. And allow this growth to move into that biotech revolution. The 3 C's that you will need to focus on and not lose sight of are capacity, both in terms of human resource and infrastructure. We saw the strength of the capacity in these COVID times. Collaborations. If today the biotech ecosystem is where it is, it's because of this extended family of the biotech sector, both nationally and internationally. Nothing will happen without collaborations. You will have to focus on collaborations. And the third and most important C is cutting edge technology. The moment you move back from it, you've lost your place in that global ecosystem. So keep on and on chasing those cutting edge technologies, which would be technologies 25 years from now. Dr. Padmanaban spoke about the gene editing guidelines. We'll have to keep looking at newer technologies which make a difference and keep our vision as infinite as it can, because that's really what you will have to chase. So thank you, and once again, and heartiest congratulations on this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your important points that you made in the future of the BIRAC actually, and the way the targets can be delivered and achieved. Actually, we'll hope we'll be able to move in that direction. I'll move to Dr. Girish Krishnamurti now. And I think the Tata in recent times has very, very rapidly starting to grow in the diagnostic market, which is a very important biopharma vertical that is important for Indian economic from a perspective of bioeconomy. I mean, in COVID era, we did experience how indigenous marketing and manufacturing kits were in fact provided solutions from import dependency actually. However, that's still a challenge. I want to ask you a few questions. Where do we position India in the global diagnostic market in next 10 years, in your opinion? How do you gain more acceptability and ensure reliability of indigenous market? Because that's going to be the major challenge if we look at. And what do you think should be the future of healthcare, diagnostic solution provider as a perspective to look at? Maybe of all of three you can put together in one view. Actually, it will be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. And so I will go in the reverse order because you mentioned about healthcare. So let me take the way I see the healthcare is evolving globally and especially in India. So healthcare today, as we know, all of us, has a huge issue fundamentally on the access. During COVID and the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen there's a tremendous amount of impact that digital technology is creating for access. For example, today, through the digital technology, both on the public health system as well as in the private side, we have access to more than 25,000 PIN codes at a home level. So the future is really on the biotech perspective. If you look at it on healthcare application, it comes to close to the patient. So the fundamentally from Tata's, we are looking at in healthcare in 5 fundamental principles from the healthcare perspective. Number 1, connected, continuous healthcare, and it should be proactive in nature. Close to patient, patient-centric healthcare is in the making. So next 10 years, if you look at it, any product or services in healthcare, if you take these 5 fundamental pillars as a direction, most of the innovation I feel will come in that direction. Second, Dr. Rajesh, you mentioned about our ability, how do we see next decade from the India perspective, indigenous production, indigenous product, Atmanirbhar model on which creating product in the biotech field and especially in an area where as startup we are recently focusing on the diagnostic side. When you look at the medical devices and diagnostic side, it is even today as a country from the market application perspective, we are a very nascent stage. We have just begun our journey. If you look at the top 30 companies in the world in this field, they're all in existence. The youngest of top 30 companies is 35 years old. So we have to understand it's a field where the big giants have come in and taken very long time. It doesn't mean as a country, as individual companies like Tata's, we cannot aspire to be a global leader in the next decade. There are few fundamental obstacles we as a country as businesses we face. Number one, which is very well known, but a lot of actions are happening in the last 2 years, which is a very conducive regulatory. The regulatory has its own objective, it's very important because the application can create a very different impact. But to really, when the Prime Minister was talking about ease of doing business, the biotech field, the ease of doing business, fundamentally as a country, we need to think through how do we really get into this regulatory framework effectively. The second part, which is the science and technology, Professor Padmanaban was mentioning about genomics and gene editing and several new development in molecular diagnostic technologies. And especially in the immuno side, there's a lot of deeper work happening worldwide on fluorescent immuno. And if you look at clinical chemistry or hematology, there's a major disruption is happening. Last 20, 30 years, US and the Western world went into a model of centralizing everything. Now that is again getting decentralized. Miniature analyzers and equipments are becoming the order of the day. So that could be an India game. And we can bring in all this science and technology to India. We can further improvise it to get a quick win. Of course, indigenous science development potential is there in India already. The third biggest next decade focus should be the talent. We have a great talent in the country in this field on research and academic area. And the translating the research and academic area into engineering and technology, there is a bigger challenge as startup we are seeing when we are acquiring talent. And we cannot sustain in this field bringing talent from the international market. So from BIRAC and other institutions, I would request we can jointly think through how do we create an ecosystem where we focus on talent. In terms of funding, very interesting, last 20 years of funding availability for diagnostics and biotech, if you look at it. It went up in the beginning of the millennia, then considerably went down. But after 2015, it is progressive and COVID has made major amount of funding available, both private funding and public funding available for this space. But even today for the application of the funding, because the funding, the private funding looks at 4 to 7 year period on making anything impactful. Whereas this industry known very longer gestation period. Nothing is going to happen less than 8 to 12 years, 15 years in this. So we need to look at a mechanism, especially for the startup world, which is the forum today. How do we really create a shorter success life cycle for startup? How do we measure the startup in this industry compared to information technology or any other financial sectors or retail sectors or consumer sectors, where the success is expected in 3 to 4 years' time? Whereas here the success is going to come a little longer. So the economic success, revenue success, profitability success is very different for this industry. So we need to put our heads together. What is success means if we need to really conquer or make a formidable dent in the international and the global market in this space. So to summarize my point, first of all, any innovation which we are trying to bring in, which has to really applicable for Indian healthcare context, which is the biggest problem is access. And that access, I put it in a 5 fundamental problem or 5 fundamental principles: proactive, connected, continuous, close patient-centric healthcare model. Any innovation we bring in, it will have a market. Out of this 1.3 billion population, we have connected about 50-60% through various home delivery mechanism, which can be really leveraged our close to patient model. Second, access to fund is available, but we need to have a different metrics for this industry. Regulatory framework, which really needs to be worked much more deeper to create the same rigor on which we did ease of doing business mission. Similarly, we need to get biotech regulatory into a separate category. We continue to same class 92, various different classes on which currently to be equate. We need to think through how do we really fast track this. With that, I will stop now and later on we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll come back to you after as we move along with through the debate part. Let me go to Dr. Krishna M. I think we've seen you as a first investor for industry in biotechnology for a very long time. Of course, your recent Covaxin has been a tremendous success in different ways. Given your background of what you have done over the years in biotech industry, I think I see that you are also moving into a different industry of food biotechnology and food sector, which is actually an amazing market where you wanted to have a different kind of problems to look at. I would be very happy to hear about, a little bit how was your biotech journey when you started and how is it today? And then now that you venture into a new kind of aspect of the world, how do you think it's going to change and bring about new models of governance and delivery that you are thinking about actually? Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. I think, 1996, only 2 biotech companies in the country. One was Shanta Biotech and second one ours, Bharat Biotec. Only 2 companies. There were no other biotech companies. So we were a startup. So we are all startups. So today I think we are celebrating the startups of this country after 25 years. It's a great journey in the last 25, 26 years. And I think, what I saw, I think Rajesh Gokhale doesn't want me to talk on vaccine field. I think everybody is tired of vaccine now today in the country. So people don't want to listen anymore vaccine. It's good at least to, nobody wants to listen. Then when the biotech was there, when a drug control office you go there, they were not knowing what is the clinical research in the country. They were knowing generics. So now nobody knows about the clinical research done. And that's the time the DBT, we were involved, DBT that time when Manju Sharma was there, Dr. T.S. Rao is here, and I think Dr. Ganguly is all here, G. Padmanaban was there. And I think we made the rotavirus vaccine Indo-bilateral program. There are only 2 major things was happening in the DBT. One is the tissue culture, and the other one is the vaccine field, Indo-US bilateral program. And I think, we made a success of all these things. So since Rajesh Gokhale asked me to talk about the then and now I think it's radically changed. There was no funding for private industry those days, absolutely zero. Now, the government doesn't believe in industry that time. Industry was treated differently that time. So it was not there, no funding. And I think thanks to Dr. Bond and everybody, the BIRAC is initiated, Renu Swarup has continued, and I think the funding has come for startups. There's a tremendous change in SBIR grant. We all pushed Dr. Bond that funding should be there for industry. Like SBIR grant in NIH grants should be pushed in, and we pushed it very aggressively those days, and it now become a reality, and it's now happening. The change Department of Biotechnology today. And I wish Gokhale to continue that leadership role in the country. Coming to nutrition, I think food security is the Rajesh Gokhale was asking me. You look at it, food security, everybody talk about Spanish flu and all that. Look at old back, the Europe has got a late blight disease of potato in 1600s. That's how the whole Europeans were starving of lack of potatoes, food, because of one disease called late blight. That's the time the migration happened to North America. All of them, Europeans, left and went to US and Canada at that time, just because of one disease, in plant disease. And in US, again, another corn varieties, there was so much intense breeding on sterility and sterility assurance, male sterility in the corn, that led to another disease outbreak in the pandemic in US and destroyed all that variety, and they had to bring the old varieties back in corn in US. That has happened in 1960s. So what I'm trying to tell you is, look at chicken. If you got H5N1, will you eat the chicken? So you ask me for food security, two angles in this. One angle, the food security of the vegetarian, which is vegetable crops. If any disease comes, just wipes out, and food will be a shortage, and price will go up. And it's a commodity market today. It changes the game of the economy itself. Coming to chicken, goat, sheep, and we don't eat more of a beef, but you look at US and Latin American countries and African country where the cattle is used as a beef, very important food staple, and if they get the disease, and you're going to wipe out too. So the food security is going to be an important angle that we should look at it in the future. Second question you asked me about that's the nutrition. And nutrition, I think, is an important aspect because we are a diverse country, but we can't follow what Americans' food, because American food is uniform, the entire country, uniform, Europe is uniform, but India is not uniform. I mean, Rajasthan food is different, and Telangana food is different, and your Northeast food is different. Everything is different. We are missing one thing on the nutrition, having a clinical research. We talk about quite a bit of nutrition, but aspect of clinical research, we not proved that this is important nutrition for the Indians, we need this. And I think we have not done a clinical research very well. And very scientifically not been done. And I think that's important. Coming to some of the changes that is required, what we need to position for the future point of view, certainly new technologies are required for the nutrition aspect of it, and also food security point of view. GMO, we're still debating. As Dr. Padmanaban sir has asked about transgenic and all that, we're still talking about GMO for the last 25 years. I'm hearing the same story, again GMO. I think we need a leadership now to firmly say, either we are going to use a GMO or not GMO. But today, the entire cotton is almost 85% of cotton, seeds are all smuggled into India. Now entire GMO crops are grown in the farmer's field, but nobody has got guts to go and remove that GMO crop. But it's going illegal. But I think, we need to stand out what can be done. But that is required for a food security point of view. That's very, very important. The second is the Crispr technology. And I think, Raj Gokhale, at least he said, it's not a technology which is intervention. It is the existing technology. US and Israel, Sweden, they said it's not genetic engineering, CRISPR. And I think, the problem with Indians, we love regulation. We love more regulation, put more regulation. We suspect everybody here in India. So we don't want to have a scientific concept, but we suspect every one of us, and then we want to put more regulation. By putting more regulation, more violation happens. And that is what happened in the GMO crops. And I think we need to stand out, and the CRISPR is the platform, and has to be built quickly if you want to have a lot of plant varieties has to be modified, and they're going to change in science in both nutrition and disease resistance point of view. CRISPR is going to revolutionize in all, including human gene therapies and all that. And coming to third, the important aspect of it, nutrition. Last week, I was in US in Boston. I met one kid, 27 years old, chemical engineering graduate. I asked, what are you doing? I said, I have a startup. So what are you doing in startup? I have synthetic biology, and I'm making palmolene oil in the fermenters using synthetic biology. I said, your cost of production will be very high. So what will you do? She said, don't worry, I'll sell it to the cosmetic industries in the beginning, but when I go to 2 lakh, 3 lakh liters production, I'll beat the Malaysians. Don't worry about that. You see the confidence of the 27 years old and how a synthetic biology getting into the field of nutrition and oil production, which is a part of the nutrition aspect of it. And I think, changing the game, synthetic biology. So my point is, synthetic biology is the one, we need to look at it, but you're trying to put more regulation, I think science will be killed in this country. And I think then people have to go to some other country and do the research. And I think that has to be stopped. We want to make Atmanirbhar has to be successful, and I think we need to have meaningful regulation, a scientific-based approach of understanding the regulation in a different way. Not by regulating too much, we are not going to help. We are going to destroy the science. But I think we have a lot of good leadership right now in the country, and I think if they put this framework properly, and I think many startups, today I think we'll celebrate in next 2 years, will be 5 times more startups of this country, and thank you very much.
Okay, let me move to Dr. Anand Deshpande actually. think you're a computational scientist actually, and increasingly biotechnology sector is now intersection of engineers and computer scientists and other people who are trying to come into the play to solve important problems. I mean, the technological intervention is not only from a biological point of view, but from a data point of view, from an AI point of view, from IM point of view. I just want to ask you a question, since the IT industry mushroomed at 90s and biotech industry, as Dr. Ella just pointed out, actually is starting to, was almost non-existing at that time and is now starting to grow up and look robust. What do you think biotech industry should learn from an IT industry sector to be able to take the next advances?
So thanks for inviting me here, and congratulations to BIRAC. I think biotech industry is in an exponential industry growth, just like the IT and the tech industry. And one important thing to note about the exponential growth is that everything that happened in the last cycle is greater than everything that has happened before that. So it's a really amazing situation that you have to be afraid of or use that as an opportunity. And I think we have a good opportunity to look at what happened in the IT industry and use that as a playbook. So I have a note here, I'm just trying to use that. So we recently had a book written by Harish Mehta, who is a mentor of ours, called The Maverick Effect, where he shared the playbook of what NASSCOM did to make this happen. And from reading that book, I'm going to share 5 specific things that were done by the IT industry that really helped in creating the positioning for the industry that we can replicate in the biotech industry as well. So the first one was the vision. And to have that vision as one voice. So what happens in many of these cases is that we tend to think, we don't think big enough in some sense. So if in the early 90s, when I was part of the IT industry, the numbers that people claimed, like 300% growth year on year for the first few years, was quite amazing. And nobody believed those numbers when they were defined. So a lot of numbers that were given, or the ambitious targets that the industry set, were actually quite out of the ordinary and quite amazing. And I think that really helped in getting the team together and to galvanize to make these things happen. Also, there was a global ambition. So it was always an ambition that IT industry should be the #1 provider of software services across the world. And I think we need to define a similar global ambition for the biotech industry and not be satisfied with what we have done in the past, but think about where we want to go first. So that's the first thing. The second, clearly in the last few years, you would have observed that biotech industry has become very interdisciplinary, and technology and other areas are becoming very relevant. So I think we need to sort of bring in other people from other disciplines also into the mix and make sure we are interacting with them far more aggressively than we do. At this moment, what we find is, and I've been sitting on the other side in the software industry, a lot of the software industry people are also not interacting a whole lot with other industries. So I think bringing different people from different industries together would really be a big thing that we should look at. The third item was regarding close collaboration between industry leaders, educational institutions, government policy initiatives, regulatory stuff, and funding. I think bringing them all together was very critical for the IT industry. I don't know if you recall, but in the early 90s, so the government stayed away from the software industry, which was useful. However, the Department of Electronics at that time had made some very amazing announcements specifically around the software technology park and 100% tax holiday for all the software industry. So that really helped in pushing the export market in a very big way. And some of those initiatives that were taken in the early 90s have paid rich dividend over the next 25 years. So I think this may be an opportunity for us at this kind of a forum to think about those small things that can make a difference for the next 25 years. Now, the fourth thing I want to mention is that, when IT industry started, the biggest problem was that there weren't enough people trained in the area. There were always these discussions about trespassers being recruited. Like everybody who got in was hired in, and there was a lot of training effort that went amongst the industries in getting people to become programmers and techies. And this is again something that colleges also picked up. Large number of colleges happened, and this was a big initiative for the IT and creating this buzz that we need programmers in large numbers, and scaling was a big part. So that would be the fourth one. But while we do this scaling at large numbers, it's important to keep the researchers in the mix as well. And that's something that IT did not do as much, but I think biotech will need to do that. And the last thing I want to mention in this context is branding. So what happened and where NASSCOM and especially Devang and others were very good at was creating this image that IT has arrived, everyone should become an IT engineer. All parents were very interested in getting their kids to become IT engineers, and the whole buzz that got created as one voice really helped the tech industry into being where it is today. So I think we can certainly get some ideas from the NASSCOM playbook and replicate this in this industry as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, that's very, very important actually. I just have one other point before I move on to the other person. I think the data protection has become a very sticky affair now. In biological industry, the data is very complex. How do you think we should handle data actually, data protection, in your opinion right now, as we look into the completely different models that are emerging, including in financial sectors and other areas of data protectivity actually?
Yes,
Just a quick note from
this is a difficult problem because I think there are conflicting areas that we need to worry about. On one hand, we definitely want to make sure that individual data is private and is protected. However, when we collect data for lots of people, potentially the research value of that data is significantly greater than the value of each individual data set. So I think we need to work on this into multiple formats. One is to ensure that individuals' data is protected, but we get the regulation to allow us to work on large volumes of data such that through techniques such as the newer ones that are coming up, there may be an opportunity to protect individual data while still being able to share data across the board. Actually, I'm very optimistic about the crypto and zero knowledge proof, homomorphic encryption, and some of the newer techniques that are happening right now in computer science, which are typically being used by the crypto Web3 industry, which if applied to these areas could also give us an opportunity to create data platforms without compromising individual privacy. So I think this is a good area to think about, and the biotech group along with the NASSCOM and other IT groups should work together to solve this problem. And the Chinese have done a very different approach which may not work for us, but we really have to find a way to collect the data, be able to do machine learning and modeling against that, and still not compromise individual privacy.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a very important area of data handling, how we're going to look into the future, because we're all struggling with genome sequencing data, we're struggling with analysis of, the various biological data that is getting generated in a very large number of transcriptomes and all the sequences. I think there's going to be some path that we need to run. Let me come to Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale. I mean, he has had a very interesting journey. He's been a researcher himself, worked in an industry, pharma industry for a very long time, and developed several molecules. And now, in fact, is a consultant and works in different domains of international relationships as well. Maybe the first question to you is, in my opinion, what are the kind of international networks we need to set up for the biotech industry to grow faster and bigger, actually?
So, Dr. Gokhale, first of all, thank you and congratulations. You might not be knowing that I was one of the first recipients of BIRAC grants. Dr. Renu Swarup must be remembering it. And it was really a very heartening experience, the way she has inculcated the professionalism in the BIRAC, and it is still continuing. So congratulations everyone involved in the BIRAC journey so far. So as far as internationalization is concerned, I think COVID has given us one very unique opportunity for bringing all the stakeholders together. We have very good example now of vaccine manufacturing and R&D, and it also involved a lot of global collaborators, especially getting the raw material, etc., for the vaccine manufacturing. The one of the major objectives of the Quad, which is the new platform of 4 countries, India, Australia, Japan and USA, healthcare has been given, especially the vaccines, have been given the top priority for the emerging diseases. And that also brings a great opportunity for India. I know that there are several international collaborations are happening in that front. I think emerging diseases, especially on the infectious diseases, the focus has gone now, which was to an extent, was little bit less interest was shown both by pharma companies as well as the funding agencies. But now it has come back to the center stage because of COVID. And this also gives new opportunity to bring new diagnostic tools, new vaccines, and also new therapeutic alternatives, and also affordable alternatives in this area. Drug resistance, bacterial diseases is another area where a lot of international collaboration is happening. And of course, chronic diseases are always being a very big attraction. What I think we need to do is to leverage our potential of scientific manpower and also our human resource and bring the best of the knowledge from wherever it is available and create a platform where the technology can be developed in India in collaboration, and also it can be presented to the world, especially to the developing world, at an affordable price. So this will be a very good initiative. I am aware that there are several bilateral and multilateral collaborations that India is involved in, scientific collaborations. We need to strengthen them and see where are the new opportunities coming up. I had a few interactions just a couple of months back with few officials at NIH, and they are also looking very positively towards this kind of collaborations, and we should build upon it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a wonderful point you made, actually. One of the points that I again wanted to ask you, since you work both in research, in the academia and in the industry, I think the transition of people from industry to academia and academia to industry is still very, very poor in India, actually. How do we change that character? Because that will bring a lot of confidence with each other, which is what is one of our major problem, in my opinion, is that we just don't seem to have, you know, we started to like each other, as Dr. Ella said. There was nothing existing in the beginning, but now now our bonding has to really grow, actually. So how do you think that is feasible in this Indian conditions?
I think to an extent it is in our mindset. It is a mindset issue. And I can give you one different analogy which I always give. I myself asked the question once that why Indians are so good in cricket or chess or badminton but not in football. And the answer for this, for myself at least, is that even in cricket or badminton or chess, a performance on one player can make the match win. But in football, every player has to consistently perform for the entire duration of the game. And that somehow, that collaborative spirit we have not yet developed. Forget about industry to academia, we are not even good at academia collaborations. Let us accept that fact. And we need to change that mindset, we need to cultivate that culture. In abroad, such collaboration takes place very smoothly, which we take so much time and energy. And we somehow, the regulatory agency, funding agency should put a positive pressure on the all stakeholders to come with a joint project, not only between an industry academia, but also multidisciplinary, because science has become now extremely multidisciplinary. And these kind of, unless we have multidisciplinary approach, this industry academia collaboration we are talking a lot, but still I think will not be successful to the extent we desire.
Okay, thank you very much. We talked to Dr. Noise that we have heard for very long periods of time. And of course, your industry is actually making rapid advances in ethanol and other production of these. What do you think is the future of it? You know, in say another 5 years or another 10 years, you would be very happy to hear your opinion on it first.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh, and thank you for inviting me here. You talked rightly about, if you remember, Prime Minister also told today we have reached 10% ethanol blending in very short time. And how this was achieved, because there was collaboration between oil marketing companies, technology suppliers like Praj, and we are proud to say that probably 70% of ethanol that gets blended comes from the Praj technology and Praj built plants. So that stride we have already made, and as Prime Minister mentioned that we want to go to 20% biofuel blending, ethanol blending in petrol in 2025. So there are two choices. The first is, of course, whatever today we are doing is on the first generation ethanol that we are building, which comes from the sugarcane molasses or sugarcane juice and, of course, now grain. The second approach, of course, is if you want to go to 20%, these feedstocks are not going to be there to achieve that 20% or the flex fuel blending. And the second generation ethanol, which comes mainly from the biomass residues. And I'm happy to say that we have made tremendous strides in that. Last 10, 12 years, DBT, their bioenergy centers as well as Praj together probably. We are now at the stage we are building 3 second generation ethanol plants. No country in the world is building second generation plants at the scale that we are building. The first plant, and I'm happy to say that will be commissioned in the August of this year, which is 100,000 liters per day ethanol plant in the IOCL Panipat plant, and probably we'll hear the announcement soon about that. And the second and third plants will come in next 2 years' time. So the biofuels are growing, and we believe in biofuels because this is one fuel that tackles 3 problems. One is, of course, GHG emissions. The first generation typically is about 40 to 60% carbon dioxide reduction. The second generation, you can take it to 80 to 90%. And the third generation, which is based on the algal biofuels, is, of course, carbon negative because you are using carbon dioxide. So all these 3 fuels are going to be there, and we believe that all these 3 in the years to come will become viable in terms of this thing.
So thank you. Just to add to your, value-added products, which is what the industry is looking at by combining synthetic biology along with the biofuels that you do. What percentage you think is the biofuel and value-added products together gives a very viable startup? If you want to, some of the startups who may be thinking about going around that path actually, what do you think is the exact percentage or a...
So if you see any biofuel starts with sugar, so of course we can convert the sugars to either fuel or chemicals. Fuel, of course, is very big portion of major revenue. So 60 to 70% should be made into fuel because that will give you the economy of scale. If you want to make bioproducts, probably that's about 20 to 30%. So there are a number of bioproducts you look at. Particularly in the first generation, when you use a grain like rice or corn, what you get the co-product is what is called as a DDGS, distillers dry grain, which is very high protein. And if we can recover human protein from that, which is very difficult part, the protein deficiencies we can tackle in a big way. And that's the technology we are looking at as how we can get a human protein from these feedstocks. On the second generation part, you have lignin, which is currently getting burnt. If you can convert that lignin into value-added products, and that's for the startups, it's a very good challenging problem, how we can convert lignin into value-added products. If you see in Europe, you will see at least 20 to 25 startups working only on converting lignin to value-added products. So it's going to be very important.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will just move on to Sri Rajiv Gandhi ji here, and just moving from a value-added products to the animal products actually. And I think you've worked in this industry which is not usually in the forefront of, humans take precedence over all animals all the while, but you have kind of maintained and sustained a tremendous amount of leadership for very, very many years actually. So what is that is with increasing now transmission of human-animal health, maybe it's a tremendous opportunity for you to in fact, work even in a bigger model. What do you think is the future perspective of this industry actually, animal health?
Thank you, Dr. Gokhale, today for inviting me over here. the world is going towards one health concept also, where they are trying to look at the human as well as the animal health all together in one level. While it always appears that the human health is extremely bigger, yes, it is extremely bigger in terms of rupee value in every aspect. But the animal health business is not even, it's not as small as it is perceived to be small. What happens is that in the animal health, there are two again segments. One is the pet and one is the production animals. The production animals is more of a business to business, wherein poultry farms, cattle farms, they buy vaccines, health products, where the decision maker is one for millions of doses. You know, there are probably 10, 20 integrators in the whole country in poultry, but the poultry population is 1 billion. So that makes it appear as a small industry in a way, but it's not as small as it is perceived. But going further over here with the concept of with the current problems of zoonotic diseases, with diseases coming from human beings to animals and the other way around, these issues would have to be dealt in a common manner, wherein the zoonosis impact has to be seen on both the sides, and sometimes it's not just the disease itself. Another aspect I'm telling you, take away the zoonotic part of it. For example, there are diseases which impact animals, which reduce the milk, the meat, the wool production. Now that also indirectly, directly impacts human being, though there is no direct correlation in the disease. But going further from here, the One Health concept will have to be looked into by science, by the commercial world, to ensure that every which way there is a complete protection of the whole ecosystem, whether it is human beings or whether it is animals. And I'm sure in days to come, it would be a joint research that would take place for both for human, for animal species, and take the research further. That's what I personally feel.
Thank you very much. I think one last point that in context of veterinary medicine, what's the two most dominant areas you think are likely to grow in future as a therapeutic or as a vaccine area, where in terms of animal health, that are going to be critical and important from an Indian perspective actually?
What is happening is that the use of antibiotics has to slow down in animals. Therefore, with the slowing down, so in most of the countries there is a ban. So the preventive measures in animal health are going to be the most important factors in days to come. Immunization is going to, biosecurity and immunization, these two are the main focus areas that are going to be there. Both incidentally are more on the biotech side rather than the manufacturing of bulk drugs. So I think it is headed towards a way where animals need to be protected in terms of, rather than using heavy antibiotics.
How is this entrepreneurial aspect of in the veterinary areas actually, for just for the people to understand?
Yeah, I think the animal health business is going to grow at a very fast pace. In fact, if you really look at the amount spent per animal, India is far more less than what it is worldwide, and likewise the productivity also is reasonably higher in some of the countries. So the need for people to come in animal health business, the need for people to develop products, develop new markets, create more awareness, the opportunities are tremendous. And I would strongly suggest that if people who are thinking to coming in this field via biotechnology, whether it is, they think of, the first thought that always comes in the mind is human. But I think there is a lot of hidden opportunity in the animal health space, and one should dwell into it and look into it and take it forward.
Thank you very much. Well, in the ecological balance, an important aspect is plants and agriculture, actually. And let me move to Dr. Usha Zehr Barwale, who's actually worked in this space for very, very long time. I mean, it's been, the agriculture, as you know, continues to be the backbone of this country. And I would like to first get to understand, about the agri-biodiversity challenges that even Honorable Prime Minister mentioned today, actually. Can you elaborate on that and, suggest what are the technological interventions that are actually likely to come up in future, particularly looking at such tremendous amount of diversity that we have in terms of agriculture, climates, and the challenges that we face?
Thank you very much, Dr. Gokhale, for the kind invitation to be here today. And I think I'm the only one who's from the purely agri sector. Of course, the animal vaccines are also in the animal sector. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts on that. I think commercial agriculture and biodiversity are not at odds with each other. When we think about it, the smallholder farmer is the story in agriculture in India. 50% of our population depends on agriculture, and anything we do to improve productivity for the farmer or improve agriculture for the farmer has direct implications for biodiversity, in the sense that if you improve the livelihoods of the farmer is more likely to be flexible or be willing to do some practices which actually conserve biodiversity. But when the farmer is only concerned about the bottom line, living from season to season, this is a big challenge. And so I think this is where the technology intervention is critical. A technology intervention which really improves agriculture, whereby we create opportunities for increasing conservation of biodiversity at the farm level. But this is another point, I think, which we all need to ponder on, is that is it the responsibility of the smallholder farmer to actually conserve biodiversity? So this is one big challenge that I find myself debating about. But when we think about agriculture and think about climate change, and then of course biodiversity is one element of it, agriculture actually can be the solution to some of the problems that we see with climate right now. And how do we translate that in terms of regenerative agriculture practices, which also will have a positive impact on biodiversity? So technologies are extremely important for the smallholder farmers, and they've done a tremendous job of creating the food security that we enjoy today.
Thank you. Just to follow up on a breeding pattern of plants, the way we use in the country today, do you think this is the same pattern that will continue, or you seems to think that there will be some dramatic changes occur in the plant breeding methods and mechanisms that we are doing? Because agri sector is one of the sector that has to really grow much more than what we really believe, actually. And one of the related point with the breeding is actually we also use almost 80% of the usable water in agriculture sector right now, much larger than what other developed countries use. If you can address these two questions, actually, and how can we reduce our water utilization capacity in future to go?
So actually, plant breeding has been making tremendous progress, and I would say the progress has come from multiple avenues, and biotechnology is one of them. Technology in terms of molecular breeding, for instance, if I talk purely about breeding process per se, has really made tremendous progress in terms of how much time it takes to come to a product, develop a product. The product development cycle is reduced. When we talk about GM technologies, where there has been no solution, a conventional solution for some of the traits, we've been able to address that. And I have to say that while we all talk about BT cotton, but I personally am now tired of speaking about BT cotton, because now it is 20-year-old story. I should be talking about BT brinjal, and I should be talking about the next GM product that India should be launching, and building on the point that Prime Minister made about Bharat Shakti. Whatever has happened, but I think now is the time that we need to show our Shakti as we go forward for the agri sector. So whether it is gene-edited products that would really have an impact on how the breeding process actually works in agriculture and how it can impact in a faster product development cycle, because that I think is the critical precision and faster timeline. So sense of urgency is very much required in the agri sector. You mentioned about water use, and I think, again, technology has a tremendous role to play here. If we think about three elements of agriculture which can have a direct impact on climate, I'm expanding it a little bit more just than water. So tillage would be one where we can change our practices. So for instance, we go from transplanted rice to direct seeded rice. But that requires technology in terms of herbicide tolerance, because otherwise the farmers would not shift. Now, how do we bring that about faster? We think about nitrogen fertilizer application as another element, which has, again, direct implications for greenhouse gas emission. So what is it that we are doing from a technological perspective for nutrient use efficiency, for water use efficiency? So these are some of the areas where we really need to focus. Lastly, I will say that, we find we are comfortable today to a certain extent, but we should all take stock whether we are really food secure, whether we are really in a good climate situation. So I find myself at least saying that we are in a crisis situation. And the question that I would like to pose is that, do we need to wait for an emergency authorization like we had for COVID vaccines for agriculture to actually get moving and developing technologies which are appropriate for agriculture, and how can we create these very focused tasks and task force which allow us to do that?
I think you would agree that SDN1 and SDN2 authorization to be released in the market as varieties is a one step ahead at the government, and would be a very, very welcome step actually. And it's the long years of efforts, as you rightly said, have been going on. But I think that's the way the technologies and country move, because it's also just a final thought about yours in how do SDN1 and SDN technologies how soon you think these technologies can be brought to the fields, in your opinion?
So there's been quite a bit of work, and in fact, I would say that Mahyco has been a beneficiary of a BIPP grant on working on gene editing for the last almost 7 years. So number of products are almost commercial ready. Now we need to test the system. So while the guidelines have come, there's been no application, and we don't know how many years it's going to take to actually get it to farmers' fields, which also poses the question of why agri-tech startups are so hesitant, because we don't always see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we need to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think the steps that the government has taken on SDN1 and 2 are extremely, extremely encouraging. But now that needs to translate into a commercial product in the farmers' fields.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to our last, but not the least person. Actually, he's one of those who have moved from academia to industry, Dr. Sanjay Singh. In fact, he used to be at ICGEB while it was in Delhi, and then he finally decided to move on to set up Gennova Biosciences. And it's actually doing manufacturing and biopharmaceutical, large amount of work in this area. In fact, they're also developing now in the vaccine area as well. I want to start asking a question. Do you think the pharma industry is going to see a tremendous amount of change from a classical pharma to a cell-based therapy pharma in future to come? More and more, or cell-based modifications or those kind of technologies? Do you think they're going to be better curative than managing some of the chronic diseases and other diseases that you look at?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gokhale, first for the invitation. And the second, I want to congratulate BIRAC for its 10-year celebration. I'll take a moment to celebrate it in a different format. I think we were the first one who funded 10 crores from the BIRAC for making a next generation bioreactor. We used it, and I wrote to, at that time, the secretary and the funder, who was both are here sitting, Dr. Swarup and Professor Padmanaban. We returned that money with interest, and I think by now we must have more than 1,000 crores from that technology by bringing a stroke medicine which has saved more than 80,000 lives in the country. thank you very much, BIRAC, for supporting. At that time, 10 crores was too big money for Gennova. So this is why I'm telling, because a lot of startups are there. Second, I would like to take an opportunity to again thank you to DBT, and thank you very much, DBT, because if they would have not holded the hand, Gennova would have not entered into an mRNA technology. We were knowing that all the policymakers, none of them seen the mRNA, they will give the tough time. But still we walked on that path, and DBT funded so graciously, we can take that bold decision. So 125 crores. And if I think from the same calculation, looks like that money is going to come. So thank you, DBT. Thank you for supporting. And I want to take this opportunity to say it openly. Great support. Coming back on this, so since I decided to come back from NIH, and our pharma industry has not moved from generic to the innovative side, even 80 years of research. Though we supply around 40% of the whole formulated medicine all over the world, but our revenue model is around 6% only. Why? Because we are not in that space. So from day one, I was assertive that I will move from that space, and you can see some of the products are very innovative, technologies are very innovative. And again, Dr. Sarma, Alka Sarma is sitting here. We have just in the process of starting a whole new vertical in gene and cell therapy where DBT has invested few hundred crores in last 15 years at CMC Vellore. So we are moving into that direction because that is the future. We have to move into competitive advantage because if we want to look into these kind of bioeconomy and those kind of numbers, they are not going to come from a generic business. They are going to come from the most modern business. And I consider DBT is a very upfront department of the government of India. So we have to move into these modern areas, very modern science, and then the only academic is going to be very interested. And Dr. Gokhale, you were chair of the committee where we worked with Dr. Chaudhary on the fast display library. It was a huge effort and risk for us. It cost us around 60 crores overall, but we are getting the benefit of it. So cell and gene therapy is one of the new vertical where we are entering, and I hope that many companies are going to enter because at present government of India is investing around 700 crores on hemophilia treatment. And here one single gene transplant can take the whole misery of a life of a children or the people. So those are the modern areas. Same in oncology. Those are the modern areas to enter. So I will say that startups are there. Be bold enough into this and move into the future of science. Generic biosimilar is the past. Many people are there. And again, I'm saying big companies are not going to take that risk. They are good as a CMO, they are good as making the similar products, but you, next generation, we have to take a lead to move into these modern science because modern science is very rewarding, very, very rewarding. Yes, risky, but if you don't take risk, you cannot get the benefit of it. So again, thank you, DBT, and I think DBT is one of the foremost departments of Government of India which is supporting these innovations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your good words, and we are all excited about it. I think one point that I would like to raise is the issue of cell-based therapies that you said that I was referring to. You know, I think the way these cell-based therapies, in fact, will be implemented is still very complex. Appears to be complex to look at. Do you have any ideas about it? How would they work? If the autologous cell-based therapies and what kind of transitions that you would see happening in future in terms of medical interventions as we look at?
Very difficult question, especially from a regulation point of view. So around 6 or 7 years back, the first Gene and Cell Therapy Committee was formed under the leadership of ICMR. Because here there are many doors where we have to go for these modern medicines. So few things are at ICMR, few things are DBT, few things are at Ministry of Health. Yes, we have talked to the regulators. In person, we have discussed with DCGI. And DCGI is saying that these are the innovative areas. They are making certain guidelines. But I will say that I know very well both the Rajesh ji, Rajesh Gokhale ji and Rajesh Bhushan ji. These boundaries has to demerge. Expert has to come. And another part I am very worried of, and this I am saying for last 10 to 12 years, we don't have to bring extra expert for every committee, because this field needs a lot of enormous knowledge, because we deal with direct human health. In-house capacity of expertise and committees has to be made, because they are continuously learning. Because if somebody came on the committee, within 3 years he is gone, new person has come, and now again he is learning those things. So either at DBT, either at DCGI office, either at ICMR, these in-house expert committees has to be built up. That will shape the regulatory one, because otherwise cell and gene therapy are going to be very, very difficult. But as you know, I am the risk taker. Still, I am moving forward. But this is a very open field and very cost effective, and because what's going to happen, it all is going to lead with mRNA or with the DNA intervention or with the CRISPR. One of our CRISPR vaccine is moving in at present. Let's see, CRISPR-based vaccine. So regulatory fundamentals are very critical, but they can be solved in an open and transparent manners. Otherwise, this field may not get the benefit what we possibly can have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just have one quick round of questions actually before we close. And I think because there are lots of startups here, for the sake of startups, and many companies begin as startups in India, but eventually they get incorporated in US actually. And some of you who have really evaded that responsibility or have done it in a different way, what's the message you would like to give? Maybe I'll start from you and then move around with the folks. Why shouldn't you go to US and incorporate now actually? Can we continue to be incorporated?
Yes, so the problem is at present, as soon as we make a next move, if I have to make gigafactory for mRNA, the cost of gigafactory could be like $500 million straightforward. So that kind of investment is not available in India. And when these companies, you go and incorporate in US, then they feel that they have more control on you, more better corporate governance, and those kind of factors. So only because of big money, we have to go back to US. At present, we have restricted ourselves. But now we would like to say this is a global business, but global business from India. And this is the way I see it. Yes, it is sometimes restrictive, but I know in the longer term, India has a great position to evolve. So we have to maintain this status. Only money, private equity funds are based in US. They fund 90% of the private equity fund comes from US, and then they force us to go over there. This is the only reason for big money, when you have to make big investment.
So what should we do? I mean, maybe if you can address this issue. You want to address the issue in an agri sector?
Now we are focused on of course, the smallholder farmers in India. So for us to incorporate in the US definitely is not something on the horizon.
Yeah, maybe I can talk to you actually. So what should we do to, as we all know, there's a big money abroad, and it's easy to raise funds as a company person. But then that's a lot of drain of resources and, all the good things that you built, which are really hard earned at the very early part of the time, we actually get lost to the system. What should we do actually?
Yeah, in my opinion, ease of doing business, that is as much important to be addressed as what we are looking at the funding. Funding is definitely a very big issue, because the ease of getting money motivates a person to get into the whole thing. But if both these issues, like ease of doing business, a typical startup, an entrepreneur, their focus is so much on the product or the service, wherein sometimes they tend to get digressed because of certain processes, procedures, all these things. So not that nothing has to be cut short or anything, but if the ease of doing business is given over here, automatically it will also lead to better funding, because, one of the things, another thing in India, what I feel is documentation. The the person who has to receive the document as well as the person who has to create the documents, both take it reasonably easy and they just take it for granted. So these are the things which certain things individuals, the companies will have to do. The country will have to provide a better, ease for doing business. Automatically, then the money channels will look at all this in an organized manner, and I'm sure money will start flowing in. It has started flowing in. India has shot up in direct investments coming into India. That's what I feel.
So what is your opinion in terms of, getting better funding in India and venture capital to grow? What should the market aspire for?
I think essentially this is a risk money, and we still don't have a culture of investing very heavily in the risk money. So unless that VC culture develops in India or big VC funds come in India, this tendency to incorporate either in Singapore or in US will continue, and I don't see immediate answer to this.
Dr. Deshpande, the IT industry has done this really well, actually, right? It really grown, of course, because of very high amount of exports that has been able to do. What do you think is what is limiting our really venture capital funds to grow up in this high risk market, actually?
So there are multiple reasons. First, of course, we need more Indian money to be invested in industries and small startups and mainly private companies, and the culture or the returns on private investments and the laws for private investments and the benefits you need for investing in private companies are not available to investors. So investors in India are not that excited about investing in private companies. So a lot of the money that is coming in is all coming from international sources. Now, if I'm an international source funding in an Indian company, I would prefer that company to be based in the US. Why would I want them to be in India? So that is clearly the reason why this is happening. So I think needs some improvement on tax laws, incentives for investors to invest in small businesses and startups. That's the only way this is going to be avoided. And the third reason why IT did not have that much of a problem is because many of the IT projects did not require very early initial investment. When you take a bio project, you are looking at very high initial investment before you start to see the cash flows helping out. Most software businesses can be started at relatively lower entry points, and then you start to deliver money, and you can, especially in services, you can start to see your own returns pay you for the investments. That is not possible in the biotech industry. So I think the government and BIRAC can go a little bit further along. Of course, you are investing government money and your money, but also perhaps if you could collect money from people at large who are hesitant to invest, but invest through you, maybe there is an opportunity to create a bigger pool for smaller businesses. That might be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Swarup, can I have your opinion in biotech industry perspective? What do you think? I mean, of course, there are the people are co-funding programs and, venture capital are adding money to it. What's the game changer you think for biotech industry would be to really, really change from one dimension to a multi-dimensional areas, actually, from a point?
I think, Rajesh, the key aspects that the startups face is basically investments and regulation. Yeah. The key aspects that the startups face is basically investment and regulation. And I think currently the way things are moving, biotech being a high-risk sector, it's important to mitigate some of that risk to attract more venture funding. And BIRAC is doing it, the government is doing it, but I think more of that needs to be done. There's more of a confidence building measure that you need to bring in to say that these high-risk technologies are being, the risk factor is being mitigated. Today, the ecosystem is important. Many times we had our startups who started work here, but they needed to go out just to do their clinical trials or to do, some of their validation studies because the regulatory ecosystem was not predictable. Today, I think we've gone a long way. We have a predictable regulatory ecosystem. We have more investments. I think we need to do more of that to be able to attract them to stay on. And these are high-risk technologies. and investors will come in. We are seeing it starting, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. You really need to take that very, very far. And the government plays a very important role in this because the government has to be part of it. See, this is a little unlike the IT sector because there is a lot of high capex investment that has to go in, which the startups and the venture funds would not do till the government also comes in as one of the risk investor. So I think once the government has already started playing the role of a risk investor, it should be something that we'll see taking on.
Thank you. Professor Padmanaban, regulatory is a very important aspect of biotech industry, unlike IT industry actually. What do you think is, what do you think we should do for this regulatory models in the country right now?
No, I think COVID has made timelines so short. What used to take 10 years probably has been done in less than 2 years. I'm only saying whether that COVID has taught us a lesson that the timeline has decreased dramatically from 10 years to 2 years. Perhaps this is going to be the case in future as well. And that was possible because regulatory worked in parallel. It was not phase 1 after phase 2, like phase 2, phase 3 like that. They were prepared to look at simultaneous grant for all these phases and do it. Perhaps, the whole regulatory process has to now learn from COVID how to shorten the entire time. That would help a lot of startups, young companies, all companies it will help in general, I feel. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Krishna, I still want to come back to the same question with you actually. The startup industry, if does not grow in India beyond a certain point of time, there's always going to be a challenge in the terms of catalytic growth that you will see. Because the serial entrepreneurships are the ones that makes the whole industry grow very, very rapidly actually. What do you think we should do actually? From a Bharat Biotech point of view, you stayed back and you maintained the portfolio for very long periods of time before, setting up offshore campuses as well. Some perspective from your side.
I think I'm ruthlessly straightforward. And I think, what we need is a predictable regulatory system. Predictable regulatory system means, suppose if I want to develop a product, I want all the regulatory agencies, these are the roadmap we are going to go, step 1, 2, 3, and also timeline for approval of everything. Like US FDA, 28 days. If you don't get response, you're deemed approved. We need to have a predictable regulatory because that is linked to success of a startup and also the private equity. Why I asked some of the private equity, why didn't you put money? I said, we can't trust your regulatory system. What happens? When will it happen? Somebody will say, this is the regulatory, these are the processes. Somebody else says something else. So we are not able to judge anything. I think this regulatory is controlling the finance in a way. Third point, market access, that is a separate matter which is not important for a startup to succeed. First important is the regulatory predictable. I think that's badly required in this country. Unfortunately, we have a different regulatory system. And that is going to be hurting the very startups. And if that can be, you take the leadership and streamline that operation in 28 days, predictable approvals, if it happens, and I think everything will move. We don't need any things. And nobody will go to US. And I think Americans will put the money here, rather. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a question in the diagnostic market for you, actually. Biodiagnostics in our country for largely medical equipments, if you look at, of course, everything is imported, actually. However, there is smaller technologies are growing. And that's a lot of startups, in fact, are very interested in working with it. How do you think the startups can work with bigger companies in a way to bootstrap this entire process?
See, the bigger companies or smaller companies, really for an application, there is a market out there. And for example, from Tata, we work with a lot of startup companies and bring their science and technology because we really know the whole ecosystem play. The startup cannot have all those capabilities. Like having a product marketing, product analysis, deeper R&D team, and high-class production capabilities, having FDA, WHO standard in production, and large sales team. See, product is not just an innovation at the lab, but the 99% of the success, a commercial success, depends upon the whole value chain and ability to have larger distributed network. So as startup, you cannot expect startup to have all of this. So the better model is, if you look at cluster-wise classification of products, and the larger companies can suddenly take this product to go to market, which we suddenly do in that model in Tata's. We very closely with research institution and academia as well as startup, and effectively we bring in very quick cycles of product. But your earlier point, why everybody is going to the international to set up, and one, as Krishna mentioned, it's a predictability. So investors look for predictable revenue generation and predictable financial commitment, which is very difficult in this industry to predict, and regulatory is one aspect of it. But the way I see it is, see today, if you don't have any diagnostic product, FDA or WHO certified, 2/3 of the market, global market, is you don't have access. Even you cannot take a product to Sri Lanka or Myanmar or Bangladesh. And so you need to think out from the entrepreneur angle perspective. We have a very limited market, and also India as a country very quickly commoditize products. So profitability is always a question mark for an investor perspective. If you have an Indian market, is a good market to enter in, prove yourself, learn. But as of now, our experience in last 10 years, if you look at diagnostics, where you cannot really in the Indian market, you cannot make money. So if you really want to make money, everybody looks for abroad. If you really go for abroad, you need FDA, CIVD and WHO regulatories very clearly. Not necessarily to play a game in the US. Even for you to go and do anything in Africa and Latin America, you need to have a US shop, you need to manufacture a product in the US, you need to have laboratories and R&D in the US, then only the rest of the world recognizes. Probably one of the thought process we can think from the DBT angle, how do we really partner with the FDA and get our companies recognized, our process recognized, our method recognized? Because anytime you go for an FDA, it's a zero-sum game. You start from zero again. Whatever regulatory approval you get from India, nothing is recognized. So this is the way we see it, and I'll stop it there.
Yes, thank you. One last question this is a growing area, bioenergy actually. And if you really look at from a bioenergy point of view, regulatory angles are a little bit different actually than what the pharma sector or health sector looks at. What do you think, how would this sector grow as it move along actually?
So as I said, bioenergy sector, but I also want to touch upon bioproducts because there are a lot of things people talked about startups. I know one good example that really has done well in India is the String Bio company in Bangalore. They came from US, started a company in India, got funding from BIRAC and DBT. They have got funding from US companies to build plant in India. So it's not that there is funding is not available for India companies to grow in India if you have a good concept, good idea, which you can really scale. I don't believe that you have to go to US and put a company in US. I don't agree with that. The second point I want to mention is India is very good if our strength is scaling up technologies and manufacturing. I have seen in last 6 months at least 4 companies approaching startups from US who want to build plants in India, manufacturing, scale their technologies. And that's what, because the manufacturing is generate jobs. And that's very good approach. If DBT can help on that front is good. On the bioenergy side, of course, we look at what we have 3 buckets is the conventional fuels, advanced biofuels, and what we call as the future fuels. Hydrogen is going to be an important part of bioenergy, and that's going to be very important if you want to fund the programs on the hydrogen side. And these are typically big investment projects. You can't have very small investment. I think that's going to be important bioenergy. On the bioproduct side, what we are looking at currently is a biodegradable plastic. In India currently there is no manufacturer which makes biodegradable plastics. Even in the last 20 years We are talking about it, single-use plastics. And that should be the focus, how I can get a biodegradable plastic development technology, because there is a lot of synthetic biology involved in those technologies. We must focus on that, because that's very important going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One last question to Dr. Usha, actually, and I end with this food security issue. I mean, we have Sri Lanka story now for all us to, understand and learn from it. And then you also have to work with farmers in a very different, so it's a very different agriculture, it's a very different sector to look at. I'd like to hear from you, what do you think, what we learned from Sri Lanka model of farming and the future of this world?
Thank you very much for bringing that point. Actually, I had made a note of it and then I forgot to share that. And I think the Sri Lanka tragedy, in a way, really highlights how we need to look at agriculture in a holistic manner. So it's not only conservation of biodiversity, or it's not only organic, but we really need to think about agriculture from a commercial agriculture in parallel, think about how we look at biodiversity. And what is it that organic as a sector actually contributes to the overall food security? And there are areas where that makes sense, but in terms of large-scale agriculture, clearly we have to focus on bringing technologies which reduce inputs, for sure, but need to think about it from a larger food security perspective. So I think it's a lesson. I feel it's a lesson that we can see play out, and what dramatic impact it has.
On that note, I thank you all for taking your time and coming over for this very important event. And really, Department of Biotechnology and BIRAC, as all of us have been tremendously enlightened by your thoughts and ideas over this period of time. And I'm pretty much sure all the other entrepreneurs who are here actually must be excited to see people who have done absolutely stunning in this country. Thank you all for coming here.
I thank Secretary Sir for his moderating this session, and all of you. Before we close, I think we have a small token of appreciation for you all. And this token of appreciation comes from none other than two of our startups, which has been really handholded by BIRAC from the very beginning. And we would like to first call in Parishodhana, Dr. Satya from Parishodhana. He was the Billion Social Mass Project was funded through the COVID consortium mission, ma'am, when you were there. And they have almost generated 200,000 man hours of employment, and 85%, sorry I call them man hours, but 85% were women, in 16 states across this country. And I think he needs a big hand, and he would like to present you with a token of the mask. These are N95 masks, washable masks, which has been developed by them. This has been supported by BIRAC's grants, IKP, and Grand Challenges Canada. The next, what we are bringing in is again a program and a project supported by BIRAC called BioPrime, and Dr. Renuka is here to give it. They have developed biostimulants for climate-resistant plant growth. And this is a stimulant which can be used for very good growth of the plant. Dr. Renuka, can you please? This has been supported under BIRAC's Big, Seed, and Leap. Thank you everybody, thank you sir, and thank you all our esteemed and respected panelists for this exciting session we had today. And I think we rightly called our trajectory for 2047. and definitely we'll take the guidance forward. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.